Right, I'm going to press admit all now because we've been chatting too long. We're now officially 1 minute late for this webinar, and I'm going to start this webinar with an apology to say that me and James were unfortunately caught in a discussion about the bleeding government and the bleeding taxman, and trying to shorten that to a 5-minute conversation before we got on. It was never going to work. But thank you for your patience all the same. I'm just trying to change my screen mode so that I can see everyone. Hold on. Oh, I can. There we go. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Bailey-Grice. I'm your captain for this evening. I'm the managing director of LMPG. If you've not seen me before, where the bloody hell have you been? Because I do about 4 of these webinars a month, every month. My co-pilot this evening, whom you may not have seen, does fewer webinars, but does a lot of busy work behind the scenes, and I think doesn't get enough credit. I will say quite openly here, knowing that this is being recorded, that I have done virtually no work leading up to this webinar. It has all been Laura that has done the organising, the liaising, the structuring of what actually we're talking about, getting James here in the first place. So a big thank you to Laura. Do you want to come on and she's, by the way, she's very humble, so she's just probably going to say hello, but do you want to come on and take a lap of honour, Laura?
Hi, everyone. Yep, there we go.
Isn't it? It's difficult. What are you going to do? Come on and say, yeah, thank you, I'm brilliant. But you are brilliant, and I thought it's nice to publicly acknowledge that. Over in the VIP section of the aircraft, we have James Kilpatrick. There you go. Anil said Laura did very well, didn't she? She bloody well did. The VIP section of the aircraft, we have got James Kilpatrick of Hammock fame, whom you might remember from a webinar we did. How long ago was it now? 2 years, 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. At least, yeah.
Were we peak COVID?
Oh, God, yeah. I think, well, it's hard to remember because I think I've blocked that entire period of my life and blocked it away in a box somewhere. But yeah, it could well have been, actually. It could well have been.
Feels a bit like a dream sequence, doesn't it? But we've got him back again now. I was saying to James before we started that we launched, and with something we do very well at LMPG, by the way, is we launch a partner, we get loads of momentum, loads of traction, great conversation about them, and then we go off and focus on someone else. So we launch someone else, and then someone else, and someone else, and then someone else. But Hammock have actually been quite cleverly working with a lot of our members, and I think we've got some of the members on tonight, actually, in the background. In fact, our own operations director, Paul Hilliard, who is a hard man to please, was complimenting their service just today. And I bumped into them again at the end of last year, where they won an award at a landlord award show. And I gave them a big hoot and a holler, and we kind of fell back in touch again. So it's great to be back with these guys. I'm sure we've got a lot of questions to ask RE tax and making tax digital. But James, why don't you kick things off? Start sharing your slides, and I'm going to go do a little bit of hygiene for the meeting now. So hygiene-wise, guys, I hope everyone is bathed and washed, because although we can't smell you through the computers, you never know. We have a chat function at the bottom somewhere. It's already in use, I see. So if you've got any questions throughout the presentation, just pop them right here. If they're particularly pertinent to what James is saying, then I can interrupt and ask him the question. If you do want to ask a question yourself, you're welcome to stick up a virtual hand, which you can do elsewhere. I don't know where the bloody thing is, but it's in here somewhere. You can raise a hand somewhere, or even just turn your camera on and raise your hand, and we'll be able to get you on stage to ask the question yourselves. Final thing, you may have noticed, I've mentioned already, this webinar is being recorded. So if you do not want to be in that recording, then mute yourself, turn your camera off, anonymize your name, everything else. You don't have to be on the LMPG website forever like me and Laura do. But if you do want to be, if you don't mind that, then just be wary that it is on here. So any questions you do ask, make sure they're not too mean, otherwise they're there for the rest of history. Well, as long as the LMPG website stands, that is. So look, that's a long, winding, some would say rambling introduction, James, but that's the best you're going to get tonight. James, what's your role at Hammock?
So my title is the head of business development. What that really means, I deal with sales essentially, amongst many other things.
You onboard a lot of the new members, or at least you used to onboard a lot of the new members with kind of one-to-one webinars as well for the software, right?
Yeah, used to. My role's changed a lot in the sort of 6 years, as we've grown, and now there's other people who actually dedicate a lot more of their time to that kind of one-on-one support. That's not to say that you won't hear from, I don't know if we have any members on here, but they'll come across me from time to time because whilst we've grown, we're still not, we're not a massive company, we're fairly small, so I still, dabble in a bit of
The coal face, as it were, dealing
yeah.
with members getting things, well, not necessarily getting things wrong, but fixing things that might be broken. Okay, well,
Getting
I'm
phone
getting
calls.
a lot of private messages telling me to shut up, so I think we need to get started.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I'll well, thank you so much for the introduction. I say hopefully some people on here, I think I recognize a couple of names. So maybe a couple of you've seen or spoken to me before. But yeah, I do run the business development team at Hammock. Hammock is the accounting platform for landlords. And what I want to do today is a short presentation, hopefully no more than 5 minutes or so, and then really dive into what you probably really want to see, which is an actual demonstration of how Hammock can solve some of the problems I'm going to talk about, or some of the issues I'm going to talk about in the presentation. And yeah, so as Anthony said, any questions, please do pop them in the chat as we go through, and then we can make sure everything gets covered. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully Anthony or Laura will shout if you can't currently see the first slide of my presentation. So let's go through. So to set the scene, I wanted to talk a little bit about the key challenges and trends and things that are going on for landlords at the moment. Now, I suspect, based on the type of audience I'm talking to right now, you're all going to be fairly familiar with this stuff anyway. But I think it is worth talking about because there is, landlords are constantly having to deal with a lot of change, a lot of all sorts of things, from whether it's the tax man or just rules in general, and there are challenges that we're all facing. Most probably the one we're all feeling probably the most at the moment, I know I am, is the mortgage rates. With lending rates going up, actually it means that in a lot of cases, properties that were previously profitable are no longer profitable, and not just mortgage rates going up, but obviously Section 24 that came in. It's been here for a little while now, for 5 or 6 years, I think. But it means you also can't offset some of your biggest expense can't actually be offset. So that's definitely a challenge. Now, I think the good news is it does seem like we've probably hit a peak, and everything I'm hearing suggests we might start seeing it coming down, but I don't think, even if it does start to come down, I think it's going to be probably a slow and gradual decline, unlike the rise that we saw. So I think the pain is probably there a little bit to stay. But what it really does mean is it's just never been more important to kind of really know what's going on with your properties and the point at which you become profitable. On top of that, I don't know. Again, I was gonna do some polls at the start of this, but we ran out of time. And but I wanted to know if we had any furnished holiday let landlords on here, because the other thing that came out of the budget was that they're going to abolish the furnished holiday let tax regime. And what that means is, for those who don't know, or never owned a furnished holiday let, one of the key advantages with an FHL is that you still could offset that mortgage interest, and that is going to be going away. So what that does mean is that you are going to probably end up paying more tax. Surprise, surprise. And again, it is going to be a different way that you managing your property finances. And again, Hammock as a tool that is set up to kind of take that stress off your back means that we can really help with that. And actually, even within Hammock, there is even a little way where you can toggle. You can track all your transactions, and then you can toggle on or off whether it's furnished holiday or not, and it will actually then kind of give you an idea of how your tax bill might change. So I think that's kind of useful. And if we do have any FHL landlords, we can talk a bit about that later. But then the big one, making tax digital. Now, I think if you're probably as bored about talking about MTD as I am. It was, for those who don't know, it's the move to make tax digital in the UK. We are one of the last countries to actually do this. It's already pretty common certainly throughout Europe, and so we're finally going to be getting in line. But it means that as on top of doing your taxes digitally, you're also going to move to quarterly reporting. So it does mean a lot more work if if you're having to do your current annual process 5 times a year instead of once, which is the 4 quarters plus the annual, which wraps it all together. Again, needing to go digital, having a tool that's going to help you do that, and that is where we can come in. So we can certainly help you with that. All of that to be said, with all the challenges that we're all facing as landlords right now, it has genuinely never been more important to know if if your properties are even profitable, are they good investments? When you can earn 5% on a government risk-free bond, is it worth earning 4% when you've got to deal with tenants complaining that the gas has gone off in the middle of the night? These are things that we probably all need to be thinking about. Properties that used to be, that used to always make sense financially, some of them don't anymore. And actually, it's good to know that, and so you can build that into your thinking about what you're going to do with your portfolio. And all of that is to say, it is time to digitize. You really do need to treat property as a business. That is essentially the way the taxman is now seeing it. All the moves that they're making is to try to digitize the industry. For a lot of people, that you've got a property portfolio, maybe even if it's just a few properties, it's going to be probably £500,000, north of £500,000, going all the way up into the millions. If we had that money in a stocks and shares ISA or something, we'd probably be checking our stocks and shares app once a week to see how that's moving. I think a lot of landlords, maybe not this audience of landlords, but a lot of landlords don't actually treat their property portfolio in that way. You've got a lot of money tied up in there. We really should be looking after it. So, why Hammock, I guess? Well, the beauty of Hammock is it really does simplify the whole financial side of managing your properties. A lot of, I certainly, before I worked at Hammock, I used to do everything very last minute, in a spreadsheet, downloading my bank statement, going through it line by line, trying to make sense of things, what is allowable, what isn't allowable, etc. It was all a pain. I used to dread doing it. I used to put it off as long as possible, and then I used to obviously annoy my accountant, who would then have to rush to get it through just to hopefully avoid a late penalty. All of that goes away. You're doing real-time bookkeeping directly from your bank account in a digital platform that learns your transactions. So actually a lot of it will just automate. You're getting notified when your rent's being paid or not paid, rather than you're having to check your bank account every day. You also then get further insights, so you can actually see how much money you're making per property, how much money you're owed per tenant. And on top of that, stay on top of all your compliance. So you're getting reminders when you got to renew your gas certificate or your insurance and all the rest of it. So how do we do that? This little graph, well, not graph, is it? This diagram tries to put into a picture how we do that. But essentially, within Hammock, you're going to add, starting on the left-hand side, you're going to add your properties and your tenancies, and then you're going to connect your bank account. And then you can actually, you're going to see your bank transactions within the Hammock platform, and then you can actually click on any of your bank transactions and categorize them and link them to the properties and tenants. So that actually all your bookkeeping is now happening in a digital platform that learns and then can start automating some of that. And then with that data, that can then give you all the information you need for your tax return, whether you file it yourself or whether you want to connect that with your accountant, so they can actually take all this data when they need it, filing much earlier than you might have used to, but also getting insights, so you know what's going on with your portfolio. And I think that's what we all want to save time. We all want to know how much money we're making, essentially. Cool. So that is the end of the short presentation, which I said was 5 minutes. It ended up probably talking for 10 or 15. Happy to jump straight into the demo, unless there was any questions that came up that we think might be worth.
As you were going through, I mean, my favorite one was typed up in all caps, but I'm not sure. I think that it's a bit of a rabbit hole, really. But
Maybe leave that. Maybe
So Anthony says it also means, and this is about the quarterly making tax digital. It also means they have 5 opportunities to fine you, which is of course correct. If you're leaving everything to the last minute in a spreadsheet, as you say you used to do, James, you've then got that stress 5 times a year rather than once a year. So of course being on your front foot with this kind of thing is to your benefit. We've got a couple of questions about how Hammock is different to Zero. I'm going to leave those toward the end, unless you've got a quick answer. You must have those all the time, but I'm sure there's reels upon reels of reams of features and benefits and USP differences and everything else that you could probably say from memory right now.
I was going to say, as I'm going to jump into the product demo, you will see the difference immediately. I would think, Hammock, you can look at it as Zero for landlords, right? It is in that ballpark of software, but we only work with landlords, and you're going to see in a second the way it works. It's incredibly tailored. So shall I dive in and actually let's start looking at and see why?
Yes, let's go for it. I'll also mention as well while you just do that we do have members here tonight that are what did you say? Furnished holiday let. I would call it service accommodation providers, but we do have them on tonight, and I know for a fact that we've got probably a few hundred, if not a few thousand, as it was quite a popular strategy over the last couple of years because of the fact that you're able to claim back the mortgage payments. And yeah, that's going to affect a lot of people yeah, negatively quite profoundly, unfortunately.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean there has actually, even now there still is quite a lot of confusion around it. Usually they announce these things and then very quickly afterwards you get the detail behind the headline, and the detail hasn't emerged yet. So we were talking before we came onto the Zoom call about how sometimes these things are announced and then they don't happen and whatever. So never say never on the furnished holiday let, but yeah, it's like always, they make us prepare for these things, and then you find out later whether or not it was right to be prepared. But all right, well look, I say hopefully you can now all see my dashboard, and I am now logged into a Hammock account, and in the name of Mike Casson, you're going to just for the purposes of the next 10-15 minutes, I am Mike. Okay, so we're looking at my Hammock account, and we're on the overview screen, which, as you can probably guess, is an overview of my portfolio. But I'm going to come back to this because I don't really want to start here. I'm going to start over on the transaction page. And the questions came up just now. How are we different to Zero? Well, this right here is actually one way where I guess we're quite similar, because if any of you have used Zero, which is a bookkeeping software for like a generic business, if you're a builder or you run a coffee shop, anything, whereas we are completely tailored to landlords. But one thing we do both have in common is that I have got my bank feed connected. All my bank transactions are feeding through, and now I'm able to click on these transactions and categorize them. You'll notice just over here, I do have a set of filters. If you're using Hammock, these are going to become your friend. The ones you're going to use a lot is the searching by transaction keyword, but also searching by transaction type. And then I've got all my bank feeds. And for those who haven't used open banking before or haven't connected a bank feed to software, we are obviously FCA authorized for open banking. All you're really doing is just looking at a digital version of your bank statement. There is no access to your funds. You cannot make payments from Hammock. It's not connected. It's purely a read-only version of your data. But what it does mean is, you can click on any transaction, you can categorize it, you can link it to a property or a tenant. Now, first thing you might notice as you scan through this list, some of these already have green categories. So these are transactions I have already clicked on and categorized. But you might also notice I've got Betfred in here, I've got Morrison's, I've got Amazon Prime, even the Google Play Store. So I have got personal transactions in here. Now, some of you as landlords will have separate bank accounts for your properties, in which case, yeah, well done. You've probably done the right thing, but I know for a fact there'll be people on here who haven't. It took me a really long time to do it myself, so no judgment. one first way that Hammock is different to some other softwares is we kind of know that a lot of our landlords are using their personal bank account. And so Hammock assumes that everything is personal unless you tell it otherwise. So everything here that says click to track, Hammock is basically assuming right now that isn't a property transaction. It doesn't need to feed anywhere. But if I want to start, if maybe I'm starting on day one, I've connected my bank feed and I want to get started. The way that you're really going to do that is you're going to search for a keyword. In my case, I've got a tenant called Tom, and Tom puts his name in the payment reference when he sends his money. So if I search for the word Tom, it's going to show me all the transactions that contain that word. You'll know yourselves from your tenants. There's always a keyword you can search for. It will be a surname, part of the address, something like that. So I do this, and I've got all of Tom's rent payments going back to when he moved in last January. So all I need to do, just click on any one of these, it doesn't matter which. That opens up the categories on the right-hand side. And in this case, we're going to link it to rental income. We're going to link him to the right property. So he lives in 25 New Church Road, and I've already created the tenancy here for Tom. So click save, and you can see that one transaction is now categorized as rent, linked to 25 New Church and their tenant Tom. But obviously I want to track all of these payments and I don't want to go through them one at a time. So just on the right-hand side here, once I've tracked that one, there's a box down here to find and track more. And I can just click this search and track button, and now everything has a little tick box. Now I could go again, just tick, 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 or just select them all because I know they're all rent for Tom, and then update all 17 in one go. And in literally 10 seconds, I've just categorized a year and a half's worth of rent. But more importantly, Hammock now knows what Tom's rent looks like. So next month, it's just going to categorize itself and notify me that Tom's paid. So I'll get that notification. I can tell you every month, even though I never get bored of it, it's still the best notification you get. But also worth mentioning, if Tom doesn't pay the rent next month, after 2 or 3 days, you'll get a notification that it hasn't come in, so you can start chasing it as well. So you're getting notified either way. And you're going to do the same with your regular expenses, your mortgage payments, your insurance, etc. Once you've done all your regular payments, a lot of those are going to just auto track because they are the same. And then you're really just worrying about those one-off payments where you've gone out to Wix and bought a new sink or something. So once you've tracked all your transactions here, that's where I think we do start to differ from your kind of your zeros and your QuickBooks and things. Because if I jump over to my properties page, this is the way we want to display the data to you and the way landlords want to see it, which is per property. So I've got 3 properties in here because I'm tracking my transactions and linking them to relevant properties and tenants. I can actually see on a property basis how much money I'm making. Also, because we track rent per tenant, it also shows me my arrears. And I'm going to dive into that in a little bit more detail in a second to show you what that number means and where it comes from. But one other key thing that you'll all be thinking is, especially when it comes to tax, okay, but I've got this property that I own with my brother and this one with my best mate, and then I've got one that's shared between me and my wife or husband or whatever. So all of that can be managed still within Hammock. So in my case, I've got 3 properties, but I own each of them in a different way, and that's why I've got 3 portfolios. And that's because I've got a property with my wife, and that's split 50-50 between me, Mike, and my wife, Mary. So that's in a portfolio that I've called joint ownership, just split 50-50. Now, the next one is my property. So I've left that in my personal portfolio, 100% owned by me. And then this third property is actually just owned by my wife. But I've just set up another portfolio owned 100% by Mary, and I can still manage all of this together. And that means that when we jump over to the tax area, I don't just get the tax return for me, I also get it for Mary. And when it does come to having to do my taxes digitally and quarterly and do those submissions, my wife and I are both going to have our tax returns done from the same account. It really easily, most of it automated. But I will go in and just show you Mike's tax return. So we can just go in. This is the 23-24 tax return. So this is the year that's just finished. If I know I've tracked all my transactions now, my accountant can just start taking these numbers and filing my tax return tomorrow. So within here, you can filter by property, but by default, you will just see your entire tax return. It will give you your headline figures at the top. But most importantly, these are the boxes that your accountant is going to want. these are your subtotals. These kind of go on the tax return. Underneath that, you've got all the individual transactions here. And all of these numbers are clickable. So both you and your accountant, who will probably want to review this, can, if I can click on, say, property repairs and maintenance, and I can actually go through and actually see, does this all make sense? Now you'll notice this is a demo account, so a lot of these transactions look the same, but you get the idea. If I actually click on the total rents and other income from the property, one thing you'll notice straight away is which of these rent payments come from the property I own myself and which come from the one that I own with my wife. Because this first payment on the 6th of April, the total payment is £1,200, but the split that goes, the amount of that goes on my tax return is only 600. So that's the property I own 50-50. Whereas actually for Tom's rent, the total is 1,100, and then that also goes on, that whole amount goes on my tax return. So were you somebody about to ask something? Or
Well, my cat was meowing in the background, so perhaps she had a question. But apart from that, there are a few that have come in. James is saying that this screen actually looks different to him than it does to you. And I must admit, this is slightly different to what I remember. Is there different versions? Do people need to update their software, or?
you don't need to update. So we did change the way we used to show the tax statements per portfolio. So for example, my joint ownership portfolio, which is owned 50-50 between Mike and Mary, you would get a tax statement for that. But then you have to then do the work of splitting that out between all the different owners. Whereas I've got a property, my wife's got a property, and we've got one between us. Hammock does all that work for you and splits it per person. I believe some people who are already using it, they will have, if I thought we'd actually switched everybody over, but if we haven't, there will be a banner here telling you you're looking at the old version, click here to switch to the new version. So that might be it.
And Richard's asked a really good question here, which is, does this take into account additional income such as full-time, part-time jobs, pensions, that kind of thing? Because at the minute, it just looks like it's income from properties.
Yeah, so currently Hammock is just giving you the numbers you need for the SA 105. You don't need to remember that code, but that is the section of the tax return that is for UK property. That is what this is giving you. It's not, we're not, you're not filing your tax return. You're not doing, all you're doing here is getting the figures you need to give to, either if you file your own tax return, it'll give you the numbers you can do, or that gives you the figures to give to your accountant so they can fill in your SA 105. That will obviously change when we get towards making tax digital, and there is a submission element.
And if there is, because you've got the transaction history, if you've got your income coming in, how do you categorize that? If it's from full-time employment, part-time employment, whatever it might be.
You either don't categorize it or you just put it as personal. It's not. It's as long as you're either not categorizing it or categorizing it as something that is a non-taxable income, essentially, because that doesn't need to go in the SA 105.
And final thing, you mentioned about, I think it was on the last slide, if you go into Mike or Mary's thing here, that this is really good for your accountant to be able to access and be able to see the individual transactions that make up these subtotals, etc., etc. So how does that work? Are you downloading PDFs and sending them across via an email, or does the accountant have a login themselves? How does it work?
Yeah, so the accountant has their own dashboard. Again, it doesn't matter who your accountant is, but people on here who have an accountant, you will have an accounting firm. There's a good chance they might already have a Hammock dashboard with other clients who are using Hammock on that dashboard. And so if you're when you come in to set up your tax statement for the first time, it will ask you, do you file your taxes yourself, or do you use an accountant? And if you do, then you can give the name of your accountant, and if they've already got a dashboard, with your permission, we always need the permission of the landlord first, but we can then just connect it to their dashboard so that then your accountant can log into their dashboard and see all their clients.
And if the accountant doesn't have a dashboard, never heard of Hammock,
then we just they set one up. It's free. It's free for the accountant. If they're trying to access an account that's already paid for, they get the dashboard for free.
Have you ever come into trouble where you're trying to convince an accountant, no, look, you need to be on this. This is really beneficial, because there's got to be an element of learning how to use the software you've got to sell to the accountant in a way as well.
Yeah, so we have two sides to our business. We have landlords who come directly, and then we have accountants who come as well, because there is benefits to both.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so anyway, so we talked a bit about tax. I wanted to come back to arrears. Maybe the best way to do that actually will be, let's jump over to the overview screen, which is kind of where I started when I first came in. So yeah, this is exactly what it says on the tin. It's an overview. First of all, it means I can actually see visually, like, am I making money? Am I making money every month? What we're hoping to see here is lots of dark purple. I can tell you my personal account over the last few years hasn't had so much dark purple, which is one of those things, but it's good to know about it. I guarantee you that. You can also get live property valuations in Hammock. Lots of people always ask, where do they come from? We partner with a third party. It isn't Zoopla, but if any of you have ever used the valuation engine on Zoopla, you'll know the type of thing I mean. It's a very similar type of product. But that will give you property valuations. You can obviously overwrite that with your own valuation if you know what you want it's worth. And if you put your purchase price and your mortgage balance in, you can also then get your loan to value across your portfolio. For those who are looking to grow their portfolio, that is a very, very important number to know. That's for sure. You can see your occupancy, you can see your arrears. And so I'm going to come back to that because I want to go into that in a little bit more detail in a second. You can see what upcoming payments you've got. You can even compare your rental yields. And this is kind of what I was talking about before about, if you can get 5% on a risk-free bond, is it worth slaving away to earn 4.5% on a property? And the answer to that is, who knows? Maybe it is. If that property is going up in value, then actually the yield doesn't matter so much. If it's not, or it's going down in value, suddenly the yield is more important and all the rest of it. So, these are all tools just to help you be better informed. I speak to landlords all the time who are quite surprised and they're like, God, I didn't actually realize the yield on this property was twice as much as this one. I kind of always thought they were the same. So again, just more tools for your armory, really. But I do want to talk about arrears. And if I've got a tenant here, Robert, who's in arrears, if I wanted to look at those figures, I can actually just click on Robert and go straight in. But it might be more useful if I take you into the tenancies area first, because I want to show you a tenant who isn't in arrears, which takes us back to our friend Tom, who we looked at the start of this session when we were tracking the rent. So I'm going to go into Tom's tenancy, and you can see just how easy it is to create a tenancy. All I've done, I just said his name's Tom. He lives at 25 New Church Road, pays 1,100 a month, and he moved in last January, right? That is really all Hammock needs, and it will build a rent table. You always read these from the bottom up. There's actually 2 pages because it started last January, but every period it will tell you when the rent was due, when it was paid, how much was due, how much was paid, and what is your balance. And this is what you want to see. You want it to see green and you want to see 0. And that's kind of the dream. However, if I go back to my tenancies and we do look at Robert, who is in arrears, you can see that with Robert, that's not necessarily the case. Now, Robert pays me $14.50 a month. And if we scroll down, again, always start at the bottom up. Back in July, everything looked good. Rent received, no balance. Same in August, but you can see the problem started in September. For whatever reason, couldn't pay the rent, has fallen into arrears. He did immediately start paying again in October, and then you can see he's actually overpaid in November, and he's actually made 2 payments there. You can click down, you can actually see how much those payments are. So he's paid $14.50 and he's paid $300. That's reduced his arrears. Overpaid in January, overpaid again in April. So actually he's got this down to £600 now. But it just means I know exactly where I stand. I can even download that as either a spreadsheet or a PDF. I can send that to Robert and say, hey, Robert, just so you know, this is where you stand. This is how much you still owe. This is why. And I genuinely I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with landlords who say to me, oh, I think this tenancy is broken. It's showing that this tenant's in arrears. And then they look at all the payments and they realize, oh, that's because they are in arrears. And I just had absolutely no idea. It happens all the time, especially if you're managing multiple payments and you've got tenants who pay on the wrong day and suddenly they're trying to catch up for half a payment here and do the next one 3 weeks later. When you see it broken down like this, if you've got the right start date and the right rent dues, this is going to tell you exactly how much money you are owed. Really, really, really useful.
I could jump in and ask a question there, James, because we've had a great question from Ahmed here. This makes a lot of sense to me. As a single let property, you've got Robert who's responsible for the rent. Now, if this were a 6-bedroom HMO, how would that look? Because you've all of a sudden got some tenants that might be perfectly up to date, other tenants in arrears, and then you've got the household view as well.
Yeah, so exactly the same. So you add the property and you add it and it will ask you if it's an HMO. You can say yes, and you can say it's got 6 rooms. In terms of your property P&L, you're just going to see it as a property P&L, just the same way. But when you come to your tenancies, you are going to have 6 individual tenants because each of them has a different, probably pays you a different amount on a different day, maybe even to a different schedule. So you're tracking your rent per tenant so you know exactly how each room stacks up, who owes you what and why, but your property is still going to tell you how much money you're making overall.
In the property P&L, is that informed by who's in arrears and who's not then? It's not just
No.
kind of the idyllic number.
No, so this is cash accounting. So this works off the actual transactions in your actual bank account. So this is not incorporating money that you're owed. Obviously, when you look at the property view, you can see the money you're owed. So here, I've made 5.5K profit, but if I clear my arrears, that turns into, eight and a bit K profit. But this is, and that comes down to, if there are any people who are kind of au fait with accounting, this is a cash accounting system. The date that a transaction happens is the date that it will feed into your tax return. But I actually thought you were going to ask a slightly different question when you started there, which is something I probably should definitely talk about is, these are fine because these are regular tenants where Robert pays me £1,450 a month, but I'm sure we're going to have landlords on here who use letting agents, and that is slightly different. So let's talk a bit about that. Now,
Very good question. Let's pretend I asked that one as well, actually.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I was thinking. I was like, "Oh God, you've asked me a great question. I totally forgotten about that." So,
I hope so.
yeah. So when you add a tenancy in a Hammock, it will ask you who collects the rent. Is it you or is it is an agent on your behalf? Now, Tom and Robert, who I showed you before, both tenants I collect direct, but Mary is one where I use an agent. So let's click on Mary and see how it looks slightly different because I've still got my tenant, which is Mary. She still pays me a certain amount, which in this case is 400 a month. Oh, 1,400 a month. Well, somebody's actually changed my hold on, somebody's changed this since I set this. All right, so let's pretend you didn't see the 1,400, but she pays me 1,200 a month, and the agent takes their fee, which in this case is 10%, £120. Right, and if we look at this rent table, you can see I've kind of purposely not tracked April and May because I want to show you what those transactions look like when they come in and then how it all feeds through. So let's jump over to the transaction page. And I'm going to search by date this time. I'm going to go back to April. And this is the first payment I want to look. So you can see it's come in from my agent moving on. I could have just searched for the keyword as well, actually. But you can see this is a payment for 1,080. Now, her rent is £1,200 a month, but this obviously incorporates the fees. So if I'm doing this for the first time, I'll click on that transaction, just like before. I'll say, right, that's my rental income for 141 Corn Street, my tenant Mary. But because Hammock knows I use a letting agent, it knows to actually split that transaction out. And it still knows I've got 1,200 of rent, and it knows I've now paid 120 of letting agent fees. And just like with Tom, now I've done that one transaction, any month going forward where my agent pays me £1,080, it's going to automatically track and automatically split. Now, I can imagine people are probably typing into the Q&A box right now, well, what about when there's an expense? So let's jump forward to May. So I've got the payment for May coming in from my agent, and this time it isn't for 1,080, it's for £867. And this is one of the few transactions which won't automatically track because Hammock doesn't actually know, did the tenant underpay? If not, was there an expense? If there was an expense, what was the expense, etc. So this is where you kind of do need to click on it yourself. But all you're going to do, you click on it and you go, right, that's my rent for 141 Corn Street. And Hammock will just tell you straight away, look, this looks less than expected. Would you like to create an expense for the difference? And let's say there's been some repairs on the property, because that probably is the most common. Then I'd say, yes, I do want to create an expense. And then I just tell the system what the expense was. So in this case, maintenance. And could be all sorts of maintenance, but we'll go repairs for now. Click save. And again, it splits that out. It still knows I've got my full rent, still knows I've paid my fees. Now it knows I've paid some repairs. I can add a note onto that for my own records and just say, oh, that's to fix the sink, something like that. And I can also attach the receipt or the invoice, so for my records as well. So it's all connected. If we go back and look at that tenancy, Look at Mary, you can see no longer in arrears. And even though there wasn't no, you know, at no point did £1,200 hit my bank account, Hammock knows I did get my full rent and it's all cleared. Now we are coming a bit close to time, and there's a couple of little extra bits I want to cover. So I'll do the first one very quickly, which is the document section. You'll all know there's a lot of compliance and it goes up and up every year. So actually this is quite a nice feature that's not really so related to finance, but it means you can actually upload all your important documents. So I mean, you can look, hopefully you can see that category list when I'm sharing my screen. All your gas certificates, insurance, tenancy agreements, you name it, link them to the right property or tenant, set the expiry date. So not only have you got everything in one place, but Hammock will actually start sending you reminders from 90 days before, and you get 5 reminders before anything ever expires. So fingers crossed you never be in a situation where you've forgotten to renew your gas certificate and then your insurance is invalid and all the rest of it. So yeah, just a really nice feature. I only have one rental property, but this is a lifesaver for me because I never stay on top of this stuff otherwise.
These reminders look like, James? You say you get 5 of them. Is it a push notification through an app on a phone, or?
Email primarily, but if you're using the app, I think there is a push notification as well. Because I'm obviously.
So you do have an app. Is that a new thing?
Not no, again, it depends when. I think we would have had the app then. But yeah, so it's all on mobile as well. It's very hard to demo a mobile app. I've tried.
Sure, yeah.
I've tried, but yeah. So what I find is a lot of landlords will set everything up on a big screen like this, but then going forward, doing the day-to-day, just tracking the odd expense, they just do it on their phone. It seems quite easy. I must admit, just because of the amount of time I spend on a laptop, I do everything on the desktop version. One thing it would be good to know. I don't know if maybe people post in the comments. Is there anybody in here who owns their properties in a limited company? Because one thing that is new over the last sort of 3 to 6 months is we now have an add-on package for limited companies, which gives you additional reporting. Again, it's something that certainly your accountant would probably want access to, but I'm happy to go into that if we have any demand.
We're getting yeses in the chat, and I would say absolutely.
Okay, cool.
If not the majority, then quite a few high percentage of LMPG members will be owning in a company.
You know, for obvious reasons, again, so the tax benefits. So I'm just going to go into a different account and reshare my screen. So so it is an add-on package. So everything else is the same. So everything I've just shown you still exists. The big difference is if you were very eagle-eyed when you're looking at Mike's account, this menu said overview and then transactions. Now it says bookkeeping. So that's kind of how you know you're looking at the add-on. Within that, you still got the transaction page, which is where I'll find my bank feed, but now I get journals and reports. And this is that extra area. So I'm going to select my portfolio. In this case, I only have one, which is property ABC, because I have absolutely no imagination when it comes to picking property company names. And then I'm going to select my tax year, so 22, 23. So now with the add-on, you also now get your balance sheet. Again, I don't know how sort of accounting people are on here, but these are the things that your accountant will need. Your trial balance. This is ultimately what they'll take and they'll upload into their tax software. So this just makes sure that everything balances at the end of the year. You get your profit and loss report. Gives you a breakdown. It will also tell you if there's any transactions that you haven't categorized, because where this is, if you remember, I started by saying I had all those personal transactions. I don't need to categorize them. With a business, it is different because you have a business account and you really should be accounting for every single transaction. So if you have any unreconciled transactions, you want to reconcile them. And then you can also post journals and things, although I suspect this entire area really is, unless you're like an ex-accountant or have studied any accountancy, I suspect this is probably an area that your accountant will use more than you, would be my guess.
You mentioned, James, when you brought this bit up, you said it was an add-on. Now, what does that mean?
As in, it doesn't come as standard. You purchase it as an add-on package.
Okay, and what does that cost?
Well, actually, it's funny you said, because I don't know if we've finished with like the question stuff, but the next thing I was going to if I jump back into my presentation is the pricing. So is now the right time?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, let's do that. So right, so I'm gonna share my screen again. Cool. So having finished the product demo, we can now talk about pricing. And I promise, and I didn't ask Anthony to ask that at that time, at that point either. It just worked quite nicely. So yeah, so this is the pricing. Now this probably looks a bit busy when you first look at it, but the thing you need to know about Hammock is it's really only one thing that matters, and that is the number of properties that you have. Also, the other really good thing to know is that as an LMPG member, you get 50% off. So the prices you see here are the LMPG prices. If you go to our website, you will see double these prices. So for any kind of landlords who are like me, I just have one rental property. Anybody up to 3 properties through LMPG, you'll get it for just £2.99 a month. And anyone in the 4 to 10, £5.99. If you've got 11 to 20, it's £9.99. From 21 onwards, it's just price per property. And again, at half price, it's just 65p per property. We talked a bit about HMOs earlier. You know, an HMO with 4 tenants is still 1 property. So it's a really cost-effective solution for HMO landlords. And then obviously I just showed you the limited company add-on. That is just £10 on top of whichever of these normal pack, you know, the normal subscription that you pay for your properties. So if you've got 15 properties, you pay your £9.99 for your basic license. I shouldn't say basic because the basic is the name of a different tier, but you get your standard license. It's got standard as well. You get what I mean. You get the normal Hammock license, and then it's £10 on top for the add-on. So it'd be £19.99. Yeah, you get a 30-day free trial. So anyone can go to our website, yeah, this very second, sign up for a 30-day free trial. Once you add, I can't apply a discount, or no one in my team can apply a discount until you have a live subscription. So once your payment method is added, you just need to let us know. You can do it in the live chat on the platform. Just say, hey, I'm a member of LMPG. Here's my LMPG membership number, and then we'll apply the discount. And so, you know, if you do that during your 30-day free trial, you don't pay anything until the end of that trial. So as long as we've got your code in there by then, by the first payment you make at the end of that trial, you'll already have your discount and be paid.
I'm very glad that you said that, because we did have a question straight away. What if I'm already a Hammock subscriber, but now I'm an LPG member as well? So good to know they're being looked after.
Yeah, so just come and let us know. One thing actually that's not on this slide, but it's probably worth mentioning, because if 50% discount wasn't enough, you get a further 20% discount if you go annual. Which, you know, some people, you know, like to do, other people prefer to go monthly. But yeah, I just realized because it's not on the slide, it's worth mentioning.
The pricing that you've got here, is this the discounted pricing?
Yes, this is the LNPG pricing. So if you go on our website, this will be £5.99, this will be £11.99, £19.99, and so on.
Okay, fine. Yeah, makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, so as I use hammock.com is our website. You go on there, you'll see a button, it will say start a free trial or get started or whatever. So and also yeah, if you need any help, we can assist you getting set up and all the rest of it. I'm hoping my demo was so good that you would actually all be able to get set up with absolutely no help from any of us. But if you need it, just let us know. We are here.
I think the reality is with this kind of thing, you're a wizard with it. You made it look very, very easy, and I think the UI has improved. It was never bad before, but I think it's improved over the last couple of years as well. But it takes a little bit of setting up once you start linking transactions and everything else, and then hopefully the plan is that it kind of runs itself. Yeah, you've got to go in there every now and then if you've got an expense that you need to categorize, etc., etc., etc. But once you get used to it, actually it's phenomenally easy. And that's the feedback that I've had from members over the last couple of years, that look, I'm not a technical person. It took me a little while to get used to, but once I got it, that's it. It's easy.
And I always say to people, it is very formulaic in the way, if you remember at the start of my demo, when I searched for the keyword, I categorized one transaction, I clicked the search and track button, I categorized the rest, and you just sort of repeat that. Then you search for like your mortgage provider, and then you categorize one, click search and track, categorize the rest, and you kind of just repeat that process. So once people get the muscle memory of doing that, and then the automation kicks in, because then you actually have reasons to log in, because, you know, Hammock will message you and say, oh, hey, we tracked some of your transactions today, and you go in and go, oh, cool, that rent's come in, that's come in. Oh, actually, I've just realized I spent 30 quid at Wix the other day, I haven't categorized that yet. Let me quickly do that. And then before you know it,
James, can you not insult my members, please, and say that they shop at Wix? They don't shop at Wix.
I should have checked your provider list beforehand. It's actually only because it's one of those like standard transactions in my demo account, so it's often in my mind. And sorry if I'm doing your job here, but I noticed there's a couple of questions.
There's quite a few, and I've scrolled up to Richard's, which is kind of where we left off. So if you could stop reading them so that we have a genuine reaction when I ask these questions. But Richard, that's a very good question. You mentioned, of course, we've got members that do service accommodation. We've got members that do HMOs, vanilla buy-to-lets, as they are now known, the more boring side of it, I guess. But also we've got members that will do flips. They'll do ground-up development, a new build either to rent or to sell. How do these fit into this hammock ideology?
So because of the way we structure it, and this is, I guess, goes back to that question of how we're different to some of those other kind of more generic platforms, is that as not if it's a property that you manage in some way, or you or a family member owns and you want it in your account, you can have it in your account because each property is assigned to a portfolio, and the portfolio dictates where does that P&L end up in terms of your tax. So, in the case of Mike, he's got 3 properties in there. He only owns 1.5 of them. His wife owns 1.5, but because the properties are assigned to the right portfolio, Hammock knows where to send everything. And it makes no difference whether it's an HMO, a furnished holiday let. I mean, didn't really go into the furnished holiday let stuff, but the key thing there is you don't actually add a tenancy because there isn't a set tenancy. You just track things as furnished holiday let, and then when you add the property, you say it's a furnished holiday, and then it feeds into different boxes on the tax return. But again, it's
things like flips. How do they work? Because there's no tenant there at all.
But you've still got your expenses, I guess. You've still got there are still transactions that you're going to need to categorize. I mean, there's hundreds of categories in Hammock, and I probably showed about 4 of them. But yeah, so it's still the same principle. You've got transactions coming into your bank, you categorize them, and then you get the data out of it that you need. Yeah, but it really does. The comments I get all the time. It's similar to what you were saying. There are people who say, "Oh, it took me a little bit to get started," or like, "Oh, thanks for somebody giving me that help at the start." But like, they just actually can't understand how they ever did without it. I think it will get to that point where once you start using Hammock and you're kind of properly using it, yeah, you are going to find it very difficult to stop using it. So you'll be with me forever.
It's the dishwasher of tax software. There's your new marketing line. Do you still do I know it's not you anymore, but presumably someone still does these onboarding webinars or calls, whatever it is, to help people get up and get started. So with these situations where they might have a new build, they might have a flip, or it might be something less easy to set up themselves. You've got someone there to help them out.
Yeah, so we probably do less of them, and that's just because I think the platform has developed to a point like even like you wouldn't have seen any of them on my demo, but the first time you land on the transaction page, a video will pop up and talk you through a lot of the things I just showed you actually. So there are kind of things throughout the platform. There's also a help area with videos where people can go and actually, because a lot of people prefer to just do things in their own time rather than book a scheduled appointment. But yeah, if you come through, that we have live chat. As a relatively small team, even if somebody doesn't come back to you instantly, you will probably have an email response to that within an hour if somebody wasn't there at that second. And so if you want that kind of help, talk to us, and someone can schedule a call. And occasionally it will be me. So
They're really lucky.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if that's getting lucky or the opposite.
I'm going to whiz through some of these questions because they keep building up. Anthony said, will this work in an HMO where the tenants pay by post-dated checks 3 times per year? Now, that's a unique situation.
That is a unique situation. We don't know. We don't have a frequency, I don't think, for 3 times a year. There will almost certainly be a way you can do it. That's one way. Yeah, he needs if we have a chat one-on-one, I can probably figure out how he would do that.
Lovely. I expected you might say as much. Richard asks, how do you import expenses? because it's all well and good having your bank account linked, but if you've got, I don't know, pay by cash, for instance, or whatever it might be,
Yeah,
how do you
so
actually?
on the transaction page, so the bank account is the main way people will use. But you can also, so if you've got maybe we do connect with some credit cards, but if you're a different credit card that we don't connect with, you can download a CSV of your credit card from your credit card company, and you can upload like a spreadsheet. So that's another way. There's also just a button to add a manual transaction. So if you go and spend 10 quid on getting a key cut and you did it in cash, you just add that in, add that in yourself.
Well, this is asked, can we have multiple bank feeds, for example, if you've got a bank account per portfolio?
Yes, you can.
Lovely. Ahmed said, can my accountant use this directly rather than just having access to a dashboard?
So if you have a Hammock account and your accountant has a Hammock dashboard, you will both have access to your account. So that's why we always need to get your permission if you want to connect it to your accountant, because they will see your entire account. They can click on transactions just the way you can.
Sorry, can I step in here and maybe ask the question?
Absolutely.
So, and I'm combining this with the arrears and the HMOs. So if I have a HMO managed by managing agent, and basically, let's say 5 beds, each one 500, so I'm getting 2,500. The rental statement will have the 2,500, and my accountant goes and we send them a copy, and then they do that on zero. So my question is, how do we reflect that here? Because it's not one tenant, and I'm not managing the HMO directly.
So if you remember when I showed tracking a letting agent payment, and I tracked it and it kind of automatically split it between rent and fees.
Yeah.
If you get a payment that is for more than one tenancy, then there is a button which I didn't show you, but you can, rather than picking, say, rental income, there's a button called split transaction, and then you can click that and say 500 is for this tenant, 500 is for this tenant. You can break a transaction down into as many different parts as you like. They don't, and each of those parts can be an income or expense, can be linked to a different property or tenant. So you have full flexibility.
Does that need to be done manually each time?
Yeah, well, if it's if it's a regular thing, so if you get the same payment once you do one split, it will learn that split. But if which I think it sounds like here, if you've got 5 different tenancies, if there's also all sorts of random expenses tied in with that, so each month it is different, then obviously that automation isn't gonna be helpful. But yeah, if you get a payment for just 5 tenancies, which is basically the same every month or most months, yeah, that would auto track.
Fine. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you for coming on and phrasing the question with a little bit more context, because I was, maybe you noticed, I'm a little bit out of my depth there. Anthony said, if this is more my speed. If you've got 10 flats on a freehold, how many properties is that? Is that one property? Is it 10 properties?
I mean, I guess ultimately it's up to you.
Well, if it's up to him, it's one property because
well,
it costs less.
You say that, but a lot of people actually do want to see how much money they make per flat. But if you want to see that as one property and you're happy to see your P&L as one property, then yeah, you can absolutely do that.
It's a very good answer. I'd have said 10, that's 10 properties.
Most people would add that as 10, just because that's the way they want to see it. But ultimately it's up to you.
Graham, well, look, I've got penultimate question here, and then I've got one up my sleeve as well, which is not going to be for you, but it's going to be for the members that we've got here today. James has asked, what about VAT returns?
Yeah, we don't do. There's one thing that we don't do in Hammock at the moment is VAT.
At the moment, you say?
Yes, and that's not because it's like coming next month or anything, but I think there's at some point it seems an obvious thing that would come. But yeah, we do not do VAT returns. So we have lots of VAT registered landlords or businesses that use Hammock. You simply just download your tax statement as a spreadsheet, and you just add a column in, and you just tick the ones that are VATable. It's a very simple manual task, but it is a manual task outside of Hammock.
Lovely. I said it was penultimate question, but actually I forgot, Richard, which is, I guess, another good one for you, and I think worth explaining. Is there a migration path from QuickBooks /Xero / whatever it is that members might be using over to Hammock?
Possibly. It does depend on how on what format you can get your data from any of those software. So if you're using something at the moment, we do have an upload facility. So if you've got your transactions, almost as if they were bank transactions, but they can be already categorized and linked to whichever property, then you can upload that into Hammock. But it's not something I see a great deal of, and I don't know if that's because it's quite hard to get your data out of those systems, or the format you get it is not very helpful. I don't know. But yeah, if you've got the data from that system, we can absolutely upload it.
Lovely. So final question then, and this is for the members here. Talking to Hammock before today's webinar, and talking to James just before, so I've been told don't give any guarantees on dates or anything like that. But Hammock have got a good relationship, as good as you can get, let's say, with HMRC directly. And they offered to us, they said, look, how would your members like to sit down and have a conversation with HMRC about making tax digital, and the other changes that they're making that are affecting landlords, and be able to talk to the tax man directly and ask some questions directly with a representative of HMRC. Now, in the chat box, if we can just get a thumbs up, thumbs down, is that something that people are going to be interested in, that Hammock could host, kind of, I guess, on LMPG's behalf? And I'm just waiting for the answers to start rolling in. Now, I personally would very much like an hour with a tax man, maybe in person. But that's not going to happen for a little while, at least 6 weeks or so, while the government figure out who's going to be in charge, or I guess we figure out who's going to be in charge of the government. But otherwise, it's something that we're able to do, right, James?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, obviously, as part of the integration that we're doing for making tax digital, it means we do work pretty closely with HMRC. In fairness, I know everyone has their own opinions on HMRC, but actually, and about MTD actually. But one thing that is sure, they actually really do want to get the message out. So they're actually very keen on joining us on all kinds of events. And yeah, if there's appetite, we would definitely love to do one with LMPG members. I mean, I'm a landlord myself. I have questions as well. I'm probably closer to this than a lot of people here are. I still have questions. There's still things I'm unsure of. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to the opportunity of really diving into it myself as well. But yeah, that's absolutely Ahmed's bringing his accountant. Yeah, I mean, yeah, why not? But yeah, so I think, well, as and when I say, I think it would have been sooner had the election not got called. It was kind of unexpected, and then that does mean there's certain things that HMRC can't do. But once that's out of the way, I'd very much like to think we'll be getting something in the diary.
Well, look, James, thank you so much for your time. It's been great seeing you again. Great seeing the platform. I forget how. I wonder if enjoyable is too much of a stretch, but I certainly do dread sitting here talking about tax and tax platforms. But it looks, you make it look so easy, and I hope members can see the benefit of that as well. And certainly, if you are already using Hammock, I'm not against you going on the Facebook group and talking wildly about how great it is, if that's indeed what you believe. Because I think it's a little bit of a hidden gem within LMPG, especially since we get a 50% discount as well. So I will say thank you so much for joining us, everyone, this evening. Thanks again, James. And Laura, how's about final word from the person that actually did all the work on this webinar? Quote of the day.
I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. I did as well.
No, that's enough.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Any unread questions we'll go through tomorrow, and we'll send over to James as well, just in case we've missed anything. But I think we got most of the way there. Apart from that, have a great evening and good to see you again.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.